Hey everyone, Tactics here, continuing my series on advanced routing for all 8 Shadowlands dungeons with the Necrotic Wake. If you're interested in my video on the other side, or you're looking for some simpler routes, whether you're pugging or just aiming for KSM, you can find videos on both those things linked in the description below or over on my channel. As a reminder for these advanced route videos, I'm relaxing a lot of the constraints that I put on myself for these simple route videos, whether that be using a lot of skips, doing large coordinated pulls, skipping lieutenants, group composition being required. Whatever it is, in general, these routes are just going to be harder to execute. If you're someone who's doing a lot of pugging or your goal is just KSM, I would definitely recommend my simple routes video. Otherwise, you're in the right place. With all that said, be sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel to be notified when I post more Mythic Plus content, and let's get right into the dungeon. So unlike the other side, where the route completely changes based on the lieutenant rotation, which by the way appears to be a bi-weekly rotation, just like Awakening in 8.3, so every 2 weeks they do their little swap and then they'll go back 2 weeks from then. This route has no changes when you actually swap the mini bosses, because it doesn't really matter. The two guys that you want to rush, which are Veruth and Arkalith, they swap places, and so it doesn't really, you're not really changing anything, because it's not like they're linked to one of the guys you don't really care about in Oros or Sagadon. So nothing changes for this route with the lieutenant rotation, making it fairly simple. So the only thing you need to worry about is affixes. So on fortified weeks and tyrannical weeks, lust timings are slightly different for this dungeon. So for fortified weeks, we tend to lust this first very big pull here. The only problem you're going to have with this pull is grouping this last harvester over in the corner. Knockback is great. If you have a Death Knight, grip fixes that problem immediately. We do not have a Death Knight in our group. We just use a knockback to get him in, because he'll stop like halfway to the grouping. One knockback is more than enough to get him in the group. We lust on fortified weeks. We nuke this stuff. And then when this stuff is almost dead, we have a range. Just tag either Arkalith or Veruth, whichever one this is. And we LOS over here to make sure that either a cast doesn't nuke us, or he doesn't charge one of us if it's Veruth, that kind of thing. So LOSing, very important when you tag this guy. Again, there's no social aggro on these lieutenants, so they're not going to pull any of these mobs, assuming you don't walk into their aggro range. Just be careful with this gatekeeper. Walk up on this hill to tag if you need to. And then from there, we shroud across to the Kyrian Golem. Invis pots work fine here if you don't have a rogue. We do, so we shroud across here. And this is the pull that can maybe be something that you do or do not do, depending on affixes. So current week, it's Necrotic Tyrannical. So this is probably a pull you separate, just because Necrotic is going to stack up very quickly with a pull like this, and you're just going to be in trouble during the boss fight. Bolstering is another one where you would want to separate these 3 Patchwork Soldiers away from this pack, because they would bolster the boss 3 times. These Blight Bags, you're fine on bolstering pulling with the boss, just because Blight Bags don't interact with any of those other affixes. But they do interact with Necrotic, like I mentioned earlier, so you don't want to pull that on Necrotic week. I'd say separate these packs, so do these together, just take out the boss, and then do the boss afterwards on Necrotic week. Oops. And on bolstering week, just do these 3 guys separately, and then you can do these guys with the boss. We don't have a ton of room here, so what we tend to do is we tend to just start the boss around this area. Actually, we have the ranged on this side here, so if the boss is like here, we have the range, or all the DPS warriors standing there to bait the worms. The worms die, they leave puddles here, and then we just kind of go in a circle like this, and we end up over here. Kiting in a circle slowly as we get more and more puddles. If we run out of space and the boss is still alive, we then move up on this platform, and then we use the remainder of this platform. So we have enough space. It does get a little tight. You don't want to pull this pack. You don't want to pull, I believe these 2 guys pat around in a circle. Yeah, those are the 2 main things you want to be careful of in this area. But aside from that, you have enough space to work with on this boss fight. We do not commit weapons on this boss. None at all. There's certainly an argument to be made, maybe pulling this guy in and just all this pack, and you just spear this boss and nuke everything down. I know some people also pull this pack and spear the boss. I don't think it's worth it, because I think on higher keys, this boss is never going to be your issue. And the timer on Necrotic Wake is extremely forgiving. It's one of the easiest timers, probably the easiest timers of all 8 dungeons. And so you'd rather save your spear on potential danger spots, which I think are what we use them for is 2nd, 3rd, and 4th boss is where we use our spears on tyrannical keys. And then on fortified keys, we do it 2nd boss, and then we do a big time save pull in the Necropolis, which I'll talk about later, and then 4th boss again. Because I just think the spear you would take off is probably the 4th boss spear, would be my guess. And I just don't think, I think the 4th boss is just so much more dangerous than this, and you don't really need the time save for now. I mean, that may be different if you're trying to do like a 26 Necrotic Wake, right? But at least currently, I don't think you need the time save from pulling this guy with any of these packs or this lieutenant and spearing it. And so it's just a dangerous pull. You use a spear and you potentially kind of screw yourself over later on if you needed a spear for one of the later bosses. So I recommend holding weapons here, not using anything, and just doing these pulls as is. You could make this bigger if you so choose, but we found that this works best for us. Now, so after this pack, we jump up here, kill this stuff over here, kind of like a cooldown reset pull, and we make our way over here, open the Kyrian Golem, pull all this stuff together, nuke it down. Make sure you grab this Anima Orb here. Oh, and these X's denote the weapons, by the way. So there's the hammer there, there's the spear there, there's the Anima Orb there, hammer, spear, Anima Orb. So we get this, pull this together with the Kyrian Orbs again, and remember to use these Kyrian Orbs to maximum effectiveness, you want to be in melee so that it splashes to heal your party members and to damage the enemies. That's the ideal spot. You can get a ton of damage with these orbs that way, so just try your best to do that. This is another pack where you could make this a triple pull. What we do is you would probably distract this pack when it's over here. You would squeeze by with, you could use Shroud. We have a priest, so we can just Mind Soothe Narzuda and squeeze right by here to pull these guys in. And in theory, you could make this a triple pull. It wouldn't be too dangerous. You'd probably have to have your rogue down here to misdirect this pack to you, or tricks this pack to you when you're pulling it down and grouping it like this to blow it up with an Anima Orb. That's what this is. You're committing an orb here. You could triple pull this. Like I said, though, same reasoning over here with Blightbone. You don't need the time currently, at least from what we've seen. We think we'd be pretty comfortable timing a 22-23 with this route without needing the time save from doing these bigger pulls. And it's way, way, way safer to do this pull separately. It's not terribly hard to do. You would need, I think, you'd need someone to probably knock back this pack. Yes, you'd probably need the rogue misdirect, and you need a knockback to put them on top of Narzuda, because basically what this pull is here is your tank goes through. They grab these two. I basically AFK at the bottom of these stairs with these two guys on me. Wait for them to put their shield up, and then I pop the orb and run onto this pack. The orb basically insta-kills these two marauders, and then it groups up this pack. And it mostly kills all 3 of these adds. They'll die very, very quickly, and it basically becomes a single target pack. So adding this to it would not be too bad. At the end, it would probably also nearly kill the Sorcerer and Bone Mender if they got knocked in. And the Marauder would still be alive, so you'd have to deal with the Marauder and Narzuda, which is not too big a deal. The problem here would be grouping the pack. That would be the main challenge in this pack, I think. And like I said, it's just unnecessary time save because the timer for now is so forgiving. This might be something we revisit if we start pushing very, very high necrotic keys, like 24 plus. But for now, at least, this pull, I think, is perfectly fine to separate because it's just so much safer. After the fact, though, we move to the left here, kill this Necromancer to pick up the Golems, which I don't think I put down. So there's a circle for the 3rd Kyrian Golem. And then we run across, we do this double pull here. This is pretty easy to group up. You just need one ranged kick on the Sorcerer. So we just kick the Sorcerer with a ranged kick, group all this up on top of these two, kill them with the Kyrian Orbs, and then we all stack on whoever this mini-boss is, Oros or Sagadon. In terms of skipping this Lieutenant, whether it's Oros or Sagadon, I think it's certainly possible. Fortified weeks, we've tried skipping Sagadon and it was fine. I think Tyrannical weeks would be a bit of a nightmare because the last boss just absolutely pumps your tank with physical damage. It's a lot. And I don't think most tanks would be able to get through that fight on Tyrannical with Soggodon up. I think it's just way too much damage. And like I mentioned earlier, again, with skipping these lieutenants, it's almost completely unnecessary because you don't need the time save, right? If you got yourself to the key level, like I'm saying, this is like 24 plus, where you might start considering needing to kill these lieutenants for the time save. But even then, like I don't think you would ever need to bother skipping any lieutenants in this dungeon. The only one, maybe, I think, is Oros. Oros has the potential to be skipped if it works the same way like Spires does. We haven't personally tested this yet, but basically what happens is on Spires, when the boss jumps away, the aura disappears, so you don't get slowed. So in that intermission phase, you don't get slowed because the boss isn't in range of you. So my main question would be, the person who gets sent to these side platforms, if they don't have the aura on them, Oros all of a sudden becomes very enticing to skip. Because you can deal with this platform phase perfectly fine slowed. It's not a huge deal. But the main issue is going to be, do you have 3 DPS classes that could either suicide on the platforms or just get through them easily without worrying about the super big slow. Now, if the slow just doesn't happen on the platforms, all of a sudden, Oros is a nice skip target. The one problem with Oros being a skip target is that he's in a bad position. Where is it? Sorry, it's Stitchwork. So right here, kind of a bad position. You could skip him. It's just a little weird. And same with, that's the wrong one, sorry. Same with down here. You can skip this. Less weird to skip this one. This one's a lot easier to skip just because you pull this 5-pack, you walk over, you drag these little guys to you in this corner, you're fine. You can skip him pretty easily here. But when he's in the Necropolis, it's a bit of a pain to skip just because it's very easy for people to just kind of walk into him by accident. But yeah, I think Oros would be the one that's most likely to be skipped. I don't think Soggodon's going to be skipped. But also, up to a very high key level, you don't need to skip any of them for time. Time is so good in this dungeon. So we just kill him. Kyrian orbs are up for this one too, so we just stand in melee Kyrian orb. Honestly, sometimes we even chain this pack into Oros. I wouldn't chain this pack into Soggodon, because if your tank gets rooted at the wrong time and just gets absolutely annihilated by these corpses, that's bad. So pulling with Oros is fine, I think. Pulling with Soggodon, not fine, so you can combine this pulls as you see fit. And then from there, we're shrouding again to boss, because we're not doing any of this. We're good on percent. I believe at that point we're, yeah, so 69.6% after this point. So we can just go straight to boss here, and the Necropolis is going to be enough percent for us. Miss pots, again, work fine here. You just don't get to pot this boss. And then from here, we're committing, I believe it's our first spear. Yeah. So this is our first spear. We haven't done any spears throughout the whole dungeon. The only weapon we've used so far in this entire dungeon is the Anima Orb on this pull right here. So we spear, we actually line up the spear here, so we hit both the Lieutenant and Amarth. This is either Varuth or Incinerator. It doesn't matter because the spear almost entirely kills them every time. So we spear, we finish off the Lieutenant first, and then we deal with Amarth. This is also a Bloodlust on both Tyrannical and Fortified. We just want to get through this boss fight ASAP, and we just nuke Amarth, CCing mages if we need to, otherwise just killing them, cleaving them down. And we can kind of pick up this power mid-fight. DPS, it's probably worthwhile to grab this power mid-fight. Don't forget this power, by the way. I know sometimes you kill it mid-boss fight, you don't pull it mid-boss fight, and then you go up in the Necropolis, and then you're just kind of stuck up there, and you can't pick up this power. So don't forget to pick up this power here. And don't forget to grab this Anima Orb either, so because you want this Anima Orb upstairs for the third boss on Fortified weeks. On Tyrannical weeks, we tend to actually commit this Anima Orb to Amarth, to one of the ad waves, just to deal with it very, very easily, nukes down those mages, extra damage on Amarth. So that's what we tend to do. I'm considering moving that Anima Orb on Tyrannical weeks as well, just to upstairs to, where is it? Sorry. To deal with this pack here on Tyrannical weeks. I think that's a better play, but this is another scenario where this is a time save, but do you care about the time save? And that's kind of what I'm grappling with on this change on the weapon, because this is infinitely more dangerous. Dealing with Amarth Tyrannical is just so dangerous, because the fight's basically on a timer, right? If you don't kill it fast enough, you're just gonna get rotted, and that's especially true depending on affix. If Grievous is an affix on that boss fight, you're very scared, right? So I think keeping the orb here is much safer. But a potential time save would be moving that orb on Tyrannical Weeks to this pack here, because this is the pack that on Fortified Weeks we spear. So what we do for this pack on Fortified Weeks is that we make sure the spear lines up with both Stitchworks, and if you get the Collector, it's a bonus. But the main thing here is hitting both Stitchworks and making sure that they're either dead or almost dead, basically instantly. That's the main thing. Bigger deal on Fortified Weeks. On Tyrannical Weeks, you can just, if you're not committing a weapon to this, you can just say like separate and do this pack over here. Sorry, I'll take those out. Do this pack with like this pack instead. So wait for them to pad over here and do them together on Tyrannical Weeks, just so you don't have to commit any weapons to this pack. And again, that's just safer, and you're using your weapons on more dangerous spots, so you don't have to waste using a weapon here, and you don't need the time save. But again, as this goes higher and higher, this may evolve, because you start needing the time save at 24, 25 at those super high levels. But if you're going 20, 21, 22, you definitely don't need the time save. That's 100% sure. On Fortified Weeks though, again, you probably want to do this pull. This is a super value spear. There's no other super dangerous moments in the entire dungeon, because again, on Fortified Weeks in particular, you're not really scared of this pull at all. Right, and the boss is not going to kill your tank. This stuff together, if you have like one cooldown, you're fine with the Kyrian orbs splashing all this stuff. And so this becomes like one of the most dangerous pulls in the dungeon for your tank on Fortified Weeks, and that's why we commit the spear there. We also, a little thing here, we pull the Lieutenant over here with the Flesh Crafter in the corner. Regardless of Lieutenant, Soggodon, or Oros, it doesn't matter, because Flesh Crafter axes just absolutely melt this Lieutenant. You can get a few into the Lieutenant fight, and that's really nice little thing you can use there. So don't forget to use those axes to your advantage. Aside from that, I mean, it's just like pretty W key in this place. We clear these spare parts out early on because we actually have, clicking the wrong thing, so we have our rogue backtrack to grab this spear right after we kill a Marth. So he goes and grabs the spear, we go up, we kill the spare parts here just so they don't interfere with anything, because pulling the spare parts with Soggodon is actually a nightmare, by the way. Don't do that. It's very scary, because they'll just murder your party members with the extra physical damage. And they'll be rooted sometimes so they can't run away. So very scary. Pull them separately. Just kill them real quick, and then do the Lieutenant pull, and then line up the double pull when you can, or pull with this pack over in the corner, depending on how risky you're feeling or how much time you need. On Fortified Weeks for this boss, we commit the orb that we would have used on a Marth on Tyrannical Week, so we're not using that on Fortified Weeks on a Marth. So on Fortified Weeks, we use this orb on Stitchflesh to try and one-face him, which we normally do. So basically the goal here is to just kind of flash the entire orb on Stitchflesh and do almost no damage, or as little damage as possible, to his creation, because you want it to get 3 hooks off. The first hook brings Stitchflesh down, the second hook interrupts his fixate, and then the third hook you aim right back at his platform and he jumps before the hook is cast, and you can drag him right back down immediately. So that's the goal. Sometimes the Stitchflesh creation doesn't live for 3 hooks. Sometimes you splash too much orb on it and it crits too much or whatever it is, and it just dies. That's not the end of the world. You'll get a creation as long as you get the first hook on this new creation onto Stitchflesh. You're fine, but it does waste about 15, 20, 25 seconds worth of time if you kill this first creation before his third hook. But yeah, we just try and basically kill this guy before he jumps up the second time, because we can instantly get him back down the first time he jumps back up. So that's kind of the timer on this fight. We never commit Bloodlust here, just because it almost never makes the difference between 2-phasing and 3-phasing. And so even if there is a 3-phase, the second creation's hook can also do a similar thing as the first creation. If you just line it up when the boss is jumping up, you can pull him right back down. And so it's not the end of the world if you're not finishing this guy super quickly. If you do this a few phases, you're not losing a ton of time. And we'd much rather have Lust for the dangerous last boss up at the top in Nalthor. Nalthor, we just spear off the pull on Tyrannical and Fortified. We invest Bloodlust and we just go with all CDs. Hammers, we all commit to Nalthor. All 3 hammers are Nalthor, but you don't blow them on pull for the extra damage. Instead, you wait until your DPS are down. So we have the hammers on a tank, the healer, and then 1 DPS. It doesn't matter really who you have it on. And we use those hammers to insta-break the ice shield. The ice shield will do pulsing AoE damage as long as it's up, and especially when 1 or sometimes even 2 of your DPS are down on the other platform if they're very, very slow, you need some extra help to break that shield ASAP. So during those moments where 1 DPS is down and no one has CDs, or maybe 2 DPS are down, we commit hammers to insta-break the shield on this boss. And that's what we use hammers for. Just make sure you get all 3 hammers off. And that's just going to make this boss go so much easier. That is it for my advanced rooting and high key tips for the Necrotic Wake. I'll be putting out videos for the remaining dungeons over the next week or 2, so be sure you're subscribed to the channel to be notified when those all get posted. If you've got any questions regarding this dungeon, the route we use, or even just tanking in general, feel free to leave a comment down below or come stop by my Twitch channel at Tactics and I'll do my best to answer. That is it for now though. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.